Welcome back to Theya. I'm Joe Consorti. Today we have a very special guest, Mitchell Askew, the author of The Conservative Case for Bitcoin and the analyst over at Blockware Solutions. Mitchell, how you doing, man?
Doing well, bro. I appreciate you having me on. I believe this episode's going out on the 4th of July, so can't think of a better way to celebrate freedom than by talking Bitcoin. So happy to be on the show.
That's right, absolutely. Happy 4th, happy 248th birthday to the greatest country in the world. And yeah, I wanted to have you on exactly for that, to talk to the viewers about the conservative case for Bitcoin. Obviously, this election cycle is certainly heated up, but more broadly, coming up on America's birthday, I want to talk about how Bitcoin's principles align with the principles of America. So we have some points to get through, but first and foremost, what brought you to write this book in the first place?
Yeah, so there were a few reasons. First, I wanted something that I could use to orange pill my friends and family. So I could tell them to go listen to such and such podcasts and read the Bitcoin Standard, do all these things. They're probably not going to do it. But when I write my own book, there's a kind of a level of guilt there. They want to read it. And so that was reason number one. Reason number two was I had all these ideas in my head as I've been studying about Bitcoin, and I wanted to get them on paper and have some sort of proof of work. And reason number three is because I've heard this sort of counter argument from no coiners that if you're pro Bitcoin and anti-dollar, that means you're anti-America, which is just totally wrong, totally not the case. And to me, to be pro Bitcoin is a more American position than to be pro dollar. And so I try to articulate that case in my book.
Yeah, there's a lot of utility in that. I mean, I was able to orange pill my dad, who is a boomer, because he's involved in the tech world. But, people who aren't nearly as involved in computers, who have a lot of this wealth, who lean conservative, who are conservative, it's really tough. And having read this book, I can attest to that. This is a great entry point for people who know nothing about Bitcoin, know a lot about politics, or are conservative. So, in your book, you organize it very well. You have six main kind of points, six big chapters that you talk about. The first one is about free money equals free markets. Tell me a little bit more about that. What does that mean?
Yeah, so to sort of lay the foundation for that, I prefaced it with a slight education on what is money. And a lot of Bitcoin books go into this. And if you've been in Bitcoin, you know this. But most people, they have no understanding of money at a deep intellectual level, right? Because all of us alive in 2024, we have been on a fiat standard basically our whole lives, right? The Federal Reserve was created in 1913. When people hear money, they think dollars, and they think money must come from government. And that's absolutely not the case. Money arises naturally in any economy. It's a free market good. And an example I point to in my book is prisons, right? Cigarettes arise as money because within the context of a prison, they have the best monetary properties, right? They're relatively scarce in that situation. They're fungible, they're somewhat durable, and they can be used at scale. And they're easily portable, and you can hide them from the guards and all that, right? So within the context of prisons, cigarettes are the best money. So within any economy, the best tool for money is going to arise naturally, and you don't need a central authority to dictate what money is or what money should be. And so Bitcoin has the best monetary properties objectively, right? It is the only absolutely scarce, portable, fungible, secure, durable commodity there is. And so a key sort of feature of conservatism or value that's held highly with right-wing people is free markets, right? And under the fiat standard, and you've talked a lot about this in your content, you don't truly have free markets because there is a central planner in charge of money and the cost of money. And these are the two most important industries, money and the cost of money, right? Because every industry uses money. So when you have central planning at the base layer of the economy, it's going to cause capital misallocation in every industry. So we can unpack that a little bit more if you'd like.
Talk to me about small government. Okay, so obviously the United States was founded on the notion of government being small enough to take Ronald Reagan's words, small enough to drown in a bathtub. So how does Bitcoin enable small government?
By eliminating the money printer. So right now the government is running somewhere between $1 to $2 trillion annual deficits, which is money they're spending beyond what they generate from tax revenue, quote unquote. I say revenue in air quotes because taxation is theft, but that's a conversation for another day. And Bitcoin eliminates their ability to print money. And when they can print money, they can finance all sorts of endeavors that may not necessarily be desired by the populace, right? They can simply devalue the currency And it's, in a way, it's taxation without representation. So something, if you're on like a strict, hard monetary standard, right, and a government doesn't have the ability to print money, everything they spend tax revenue on, they're going to have to garner genuine support for that cause. This is something you saw during the American Revolution from both sides. So the patriots had to generate support and effectively like create war propaganda to get people on their side. And so did the Brits, right? They had to generate their own sort of propaganda to incentivize people to pay taxes to fund these wars, right? And where we're at in America in 2024 is they don't have to get any support for anything they want to spend money on. They can pass these massive bills with all this stuff that nobody's actually reading, and they can finance endless wars, and they can finance, destructive government welfare programs, and they can finance just anything that we don't want. It doesn't matter because they have a money printer. And so if you truly want small government, if you truly want your representatives to be held accountable to the constituents, then you have to have a hard monetary standard. And Bitcoin is the best like opportunity to implement that.
Of course. And Trump has even talked about that. I mean, if we want our officials to be held accountable, then they need to have something that you can't print more of. If we are holding Bitcoin on our balance sheet, we're kind of holding our feet to the fire, the government can be incentivized to become more austere. And holding Bitcoin at an individual level makes it so that if they don't do that, then that's how you insulate yourselves from it. I absolutely love that. So you talked about, back in the day, in order to garner support for, these war efforts, obviously propaganda had to happen on both sides. The founding principle of this country, we talk about small government, how is Bitcoin aligned with the founding principles of this country? You have a wonderful quote here on the very back by Thomas Jefferson of your book that says, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs." I'm going to leave it at that and kind of let you opine on that a little bit there. How is Bitcoin kind of aligned with the founding principles of this country?
Yeah, so Jefferson wasn't the only founding father who was opposed to central banking. Many of them were. And it mostly boils down to property, right? So you hear often life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Originally, that phrase was life, liberty, and property. And something about Bitcoin that makes it different from any form of property is that it's truly immutable. So you can have words in your head and nobody can physically take them from you. They can hold a gun to your head and you don't have to give it up. They can sort of coerce it out of you, but nobody can physically seize it from you and nobody can devalue your Bitcoin. And so I love the Constitution. It's a great framework, but it doesn't give you your rights. You can still be infringed upon by the government. And this is sort of, the founding fathers laid this out. They said, your rights don't come from government. They come from God. They don't even come from the Constitution. This is just a framework for understanding these are sort of the rights that are inherent to us as humans and that government should not impede upon. But like we've seen countless times in American history, some of the rights in the Constitution, they get impeded upon, right? FDR passed Executive Order 6102 to steal gold from people. There's been all sorts of restrictions on free speech and gun rights, and property tax in a way is inhibiting your property rights, literally, because they're taxing you for owning property. And so Bitcoin, if we think about rights coming from God in a way that are immutable and government can't do anything about it, no matter what, Bitcoin truly is the first manifestation of that. Because you can have these words in your head, you can have geographically distributed multisig, made easy by Theya, and nobody can take it from you. And so Bitcoin is property rights in honestly the first form in human history.
Smooth plug, by the way. Well done. But it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, anything and everything can be seized from you. Anything and everything when it comes to physical property. Obviously, you say our rights come from God. That's absolutely correct. But any physical property that you own can be taken from you, particularly gold, which is the current leader of the hard money asset market. And Bitcoin is the single asset that cannot be stolen from you. Very, very well done. Extremely well said.
And I'll add to it there real quick is the second area where this is aligned with the founding principles of America is free speech. And code is free speech. And also within Bitcoin, you can embed any sort of message you want into the blockchain and it will exist for eternity. There's nothing.
Even if it's a picture of a cat and people hate it, you can do it.
Yeah, even if it's the most stupid thing. And personally, we're obviously alluding to ordinals here. I'm not a huge fan myself, but it goes to show that even if people don't like it, if it's aligned with the consensus rules of Bitcoin, it can be there. And that's how free speech should work. It's based on, hey, I may not agree with what you're saying, but I respect your right to do it anyways. And Bitcoin enables that in a way where no third party or no central authority can dictate what can or can't be said on the chain.
Extremely well said. You know, when it comes to the founding principles of this country, it seems like they've been well and truly lost on a lot of people. You know, we still say the Pledge of Allegiance every single day when we're in school, when we're going to public school, but it seems like not a lot of people really understand what's included in there. I really like how you went through kind of the gambit there and discussed how America is aligned with the founding principles of this country. Bitcoin is aligned with the founding principles of this country, rather. So Bitcoin in and of itself, it has a tendency to change people, right? I think when I came into Bitcoin, I certainly took on a lot more responsibility as an individual, rather than, you know, looking to the world to solve my problems or what have you. Bitcoin in and of itself kind of brings that out of people, right? And at a national level, it's kind of something that we all need. Everyone's looking to the government for a handout. It seems like something is needed in order to incentivize that personal responsibility. How do you think Bitcoin does that? Do you think Bitcoin does that for individuals and other things too?
Absolutely. And personal responsibility, it's almost a cliche characterization of conservatives, this idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And that's become difficult financially under the fiat system, which we can dive into in a little bit. But Bitcoin absolutely incentivizes responsibility, both for individuals and institutions. So let's start with individuals. The primary thing is Bitcoin self-custody is responsibility. There are no bailouts. There's no customer support line. If you lose your keys, that's it. Your Bitcoin's gone. Nobody can get it back. And this is something, you know, self-custody fundamentally is fairly simple. You have words and you don't lose them. But it is a level of responsibility that is unlike anything else. People are used to trusting banks with their wealth, or, you know, they have their stock portfolio, they have their house. You know, these are things you can't necessarily lose based on personal incompetence. They can be seized. And so with Bitcoin, you have that great power of unseizable property, but with that becomes great responsibility. You have to manage your keys properly. And this does bleed into all areas of life. I myself, like you, I've become more responsible since I've got into Bitcoin. I got into Bitcoin early 2021. I was in college, kind of a degenerate, didn't really have my life together. And Bitcoin, in a way, kind of gave me this framework, right? And this foundation, because I knew, all right, I can save this money for the future and it's going to be there, right? And there's something sort of objective to build towards. And so having that foundation allowed me to be more responsible in all sorts of areas of my life, increase my skill sets, develop better relationships with the people around me. And then obviously it's led to better financial responsibility, right? I wasn't saving any money before Bitcoin. I just spend everything I earned. And so Bitcoin completely turned that upside down for me as an individual. And then when we get into responsibility at the institutional level, Bitcoin absolutely enforces that. And let's just look at some historical case studies, right? Any institution that has rehypothecated Bitcoin, basically they lent out more than they had. There was a mismatch between liabilities and assets. They've all been burned. They've all gone under. And there's no Bitcoin printer to make them whole, right? In the fiat standard, or the fiat system rather, it incentivizes irresponsibility and risk taking, because these financial institutions can lend out as much money as possible. And if it doesn't get paid back, it's okay because they've been deemed too big to fail. And the Federal Reserve will print money to make them whole, passing the risk and the cost onto the American people or anybody else who saves in dollars. But Bitcoin, inversely, like there's no way to print more Bitcoin. So you as a financial institution have to be responsible. You can't rehypothecate your Bitcoin because you're going to ultimately get burned. And so Bitcoin forces everybody to be responsible, and that's a conservative value.
Completely agreed. I mean, money is a communication mechanism, and by having money, you know, by having a communication mechanism that you can't manipulate, that is absolute for all of time, it makes individuals and institutions hold their feet to the fire. And all of these institutions and these people that have been impacted by capital misallocation and the distortions that, the distortions that result from central planning and artificially printing money and manipulating the cost of money, by returning to a standard where that communication mechanism is totally unmanipulated, things become the way that they should be, and that's the most conservative value of all. Conservatives now more than ever, the pendulum is swinging so very strongly back to the right. Frankly, I for one am very happy about that. The reason it's because we've gone to such great lengths to the left, all of this lunacy, and all of that's been enabled by the fact that the institutions that fund all this, are funded by money that's printed out of thin air. Bitcoin represents a return to that. Conservatives, must be very, very happy about that.
Absolutely. And there's a point I make in my book, and I feel that this kind of really hits a strong note where we're at in society. And it's this idea of go woke, go broke. Conservatives have used financial boycotts to pretty good success in the past. And the case I reference in my book is Bud Light. So it kind of dates the time when I was writing this part of the book. But in 2023, Bud Light, I'm not going to say the name, but we all know what they did. They put a certain person on all of their branding and their marketing that most conservatives do not agree with that lifestyle. And what happened is everybody stopped buying Bud Light. Their stock tanked, right? People voted with their wallet. And that is the most impactful vote you can have, is where you allocate your capital, because it's a reflection of your values. And it tells the world, hey, if you're spending money on something, I want more of this. I like the saying, it's a signal to entrepreneurs to produce more of it. If you're not buying a certain good, it's a signal that, hey, we don't like this thing, stop making it. And if you want to truly vote with your wallet, and if you're against the massive reckless spending in Washington, D.C., then you need to stop buying treasury bonds, because that is actually what funds this, and you need to start holding Bitcoin. So Bitcoin allows you to basically force the government to say, like, hey, you're going woke, you're going to go broke, because we're going to stop lending you this money and we're going to opt out into this superior monetary system.
Extremely well said. Extremely well said. The fewer dollars you own, the harder it is to get what they get done, because there's a smaller pool of dollars to dilute. So they have to issue more and more debt, and the Fed has to monetize more and more of it. So literally, as you are buying Bitcoin, you're making it harder for them to do the job of oppressing you. Right? Extremely well said.
Right. And when people say, I'm voting for Bitcoin, I'm voting with my wallet, this is what they're referencing.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Well done. You talk about Bitcoin restoring the nuclear family. One component of that is the cost associated with raising a family is so high now. Obviously we just talked about the ways that it changes you as an individual. Another component is the cost associated with raising a family. How else does Bitcoin restore the nuclear family?
Yeah, so if you look at statistics since 1971, we'll use that as our benchmark because that's when we officially severed from the gold standard. We've seen people get married at later dates, and we've seen more two-income households, right? We're not seeing one parent working and one parent raising the kids. And so when both parents are working, what happens? The government's raising the kids, right?
Or they have no kids at all, and you end up with dinks.
Precisely, yeah. That's a huge problem in itself. We need to be fruitful and multiply and repopulate the earth. And you've also seen increased divorce rates, and you've seen more single mothers, right? Children need a father in the home. And so this breakdown of the nuclear family, the finger's often pointed towards feminism and culture, and sure, that plays a role in it. But really the primary catalyst, and something that's not talked about on the right, is the financial aspect of it. Like, I don't like to make excuses for people. You see the TikToks of the Gen Zers, the millennials in their car crying about how everything's expensive. And I do feel like as men, we should take it upon ourselves to increase our skill set to make enough to provide on one income. But by definition, most people are average or below average, and you simply cannot support a family on one average income anymore. And that's because inflation devalues your labor and it devalues your time. And so fiat money is kind of the driving hammer into the destruction of the nuclear family. And so Bitcoin, a hard money standard, can absolutely restore that.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I mean, people want to have more of what they earn. And the way that you do that is not in the currency that they're actively diluting in order to fund themselves, right? Because if they can fund themselves endlessly by printing more money, they don't work for you. It's by saving in Bitcoin that makes it, more financially feasible to raise a family.
Absolutely. And when people are so focused on how can I make rent this month, they're not thinking long term, right? We in Bitcoin always talk about time preference, but this is a real thing. And to me, a big part of families is generational wealth. And when I think about what can I hold as an asset that I can give to my grandchildren, they can give to their grandchildren, the list is very, very small, right? Because real estate, I mean, one, you have to pick the jurisdiction that's going to win every war for the next couple generations. You can't hold dollars because they're going to lose value because of inflation. Equities, all right, what were the top companies 100 years ago? I couldn't tell you, right? So trying to pick which companies are going to win on a going forward basis, that's difficult. Gold, we've seen gold get seized, right? And plus gold has a 2% inflation rate every year, and Bitcoin has a programmatic inflation rate that's going to zero. So you're really low on options, and Bitcoin is the only option when it comes to creating generational wealth. And there's all sorts of barriers to preserving generational wealth. I understand why it's like kind of a taboo topic and people aren't necessarily concerned with it because they're so focused on just getting by today, right? They can't think long term. You've got, inheritance tax to even just pass on your wealth after you die. The government wants their hand in that pie, right? And so Bitcoin is definitely the best way because 21 million is the cap forever, and there's nothing that can change that. And there's all sorts of creative ways you can go about passing on your Bitcoin to your offsprings. You can, set up multi-sigs, you can time lock, you can do all sorts of different variations. So Bitcoin is definitely going to be what I give to my grandchildren.
Me as well, among many other things, and you're right, it's certainly not something that people think about their time preference as a result of so much money printing and so much slamming interest rates to the zero lower bound. It's created this me, I want everything for me. And society a lot of the times will point the finger at, a lot of other extraneous issues, right? As you mentioned, whether it's feminism or something else. But you have to look to the root of all of this. And the root of all of this is 1971, when we fully left the gold standard. We devalued the dollar relative to gold a few times before that. 1971 is when we truly left. And as a result of that, I mean, it's so interesting because we can look back and see that is the kind of inflection point, and it's where the roots of this toxic tree have taken hold, and we know about it, and we have this beautiful asset that at an individual level we can insulate ourselves from it with. It's really a remarkable thing.
Absolutely. And something we keep alluding to here is this artificial manipulation of interest rates lower. And I want to elaborate on that a little bit because with any other industry, if you artificially manipulate prices lower, you're going to have increased demand, but you're not going to have increased supply because entrepreneurs won't be able to make a profit. But the unique thing about lending money is there's no cost to it, right? It's literally keystroke. So it doesn't matter what the price is, like of interest rates, banks will lend money because they are going to make some amount of profit and they don't have any of the risk, right? So you get this massive increase in demand when interest rates are artificially low. But unlike other industries, you can actually have supply to come in and match that, where typically you would just get a massive shortage, right? You have demand, but supply isn't there, but they can just print money anyways. And it doesn't really matter if interest rates are low. It doesn't matter, they're only making 2%, whatever. Like that's still better than 0%.
Yeah, because of their ability to make money out of thin air. Normally any business that was doing that would go under because, like you said, the supply wouldn't be there. But because they can make money out of thin air and also they're not required to hold any of it on the books, they're kind of insulated from that. And so it's this awful beast we've created. I want to ask you about energy production for conservatives, especially over the last 8 years. One of Trump's main pieces of his campaign was energy independence, was using the energy we have here in the United States, fracking, with for our own oil that we have here. We have so much of it that we just haven't used. Nuclear energy, which is something that Vivek has, who is now on Team Trump and could very well be the VP, has been hammering very, very closely. You obviously work for Blockware, that's very involved on the energy market side of things. So elaborate a little bit on, energy production in the United States, what the conservative viewpoint is there and how Bitcoin fits into all of it.
Yeah, I felt this was absolutely something I needed to touch on in my book because oil, natural gas, nuclear, the left has turned these into like demons, right? Climate change is this boogeyman that they always hang over your head, but it never actually arises. And it's just, and an excuse for governments to become more totalitarian and raise taxes and everything.
In 1970, an ice age was going to happen in 1980, and here now, it didn't happen.
Yeah, like what's going on? I thought Florida's supposed to be underwater 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I felt this was an area where the right wing and Bitcoin miners could really coalesce and form sort of a strong bond. And let's get into this. And you mentioned I work for Blockware, a Bitcoin mining company. We have a facility out in eastern Kentucky. I won't say exactly where, but it's in the Appalachian region. And this was an area massively into coal, right? Some of the people that work at our facility, they're third, fourth, fifth generation coal miners. And this area was just totally ransacked by bad government energy policy. And so one thing Bitcoin mining is doing is it's re-incentivizing the production of energy of all sources, right? Not just natural gas and coal and nuclear, but also wind and solar if you're into that. And that's the unique part about Bitcoin mining is it doesn't care about where the source of the energy comes from. It just wants energy, right? It wants a low cost energy no matter what. And so Bitcoin, because it creates that incentive and because Bitcoin miners are willing to buy energy at any cost anywhere, right? They're very mobile. They can go anywhere to produce or to purchase energy, right? Oftentimes energy is produced in very remote locations in the world, West Texas, and, you've got wind and solar and these remote oases of natural gas, right? Those areas, there's not large population centers to purchase that energy. So if you're an energy producer, you have a problem, right? You have a supply and demand problem because demand is super variable. So peak energy demand often occurs in the summer during the hottest part of the year, late July, early August, around 5 to 7 p.m. Everybody comes home from work. They're doing the dishes, they're cooking, they're doing laundry, etc. There's a lot of stress on the grid in that very moment. And so you can't magically scale your grid like in a split second to provide all that energy. So your grid already needs to be capable of producing that much. But the issue arises when most of the year you're not producing that much energy, right? And so you have basically all these resources that aren't being used. Well, that's where Bitcoin miners step in. They can purchase all of that surplus energy, but unlike other large energy consumers, they can actually turn off in a programmatic way in a split second, right? Think about other large energy consumers. You have hospitals. Obviously, you don't want hospitals turning down their power consumption during a heat wave or a blizzard. You've got data centers. They don't exactly want to turn off because people are using their platforms, right? You've got sort of large manufacturing plants, but you can't just stop 5% of the consumption of a manufacturing plant because it's all sort of one unit that's intertwined together. But you could turn off 5% of the ASICs, right? And there's no really like negative effects for the miner. Like obviously they're going to lose revenue, whatever, when they're turning off, but in a way, sometimes they even make more money, right? Because when there's that extra demand on or for power consumption, prices actually go up. So it makes sense for miners to unplug or they're contractually obligated. So there's just this, it fits like a glove, right? Energy production and Bitcoin mining. And so I really wanted to hammer that point home in my book.
Yeah, and so the thing with this idea of reflexively being able to shut on and shut off based on demand, this is something that's completely unique to Bitcoin, and we've seen it implemented in Texas, particularly. Texas has had really strange, a couple of blizzards over the last several years, really, and Bitcoin mining operations have been paid by their town or their city or their municipality. And there's a contract where, if grid demand, is huge because of some kind of extraneous circumstance, some kind of natural disaster or something, those miners can shut off, and the city pays them for that. So the city pays them to have this constant, steady demand, so that way the grid isn't losing money. And so it's making these cities more money because not only is the amount of energy they're producing is higher, but they can keep it there because the ASICs are always going to want that power. And then when times get tough, the ASICs shut off and you have plenty of excess capacity in order to deal with that excess demand, whether it's during a blizzard or a heat wave or something else. So, if you are a city, if you're a town, if you're some other municipality, if you're a region, Bitcoin mining should be something that you are looking into, that you want, because it's going to bring more jobs, it's going to bring more economic development, and it's going to make it so that your area of the world is more livable. It is a better place than its competitors.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And the analogy I like to make to really boil this down for people is imagine you're running Joe's Pizza Shop and I say, all right,
It's because
I'm
of
really
Italian,
hungry.
isn't it?
Exactly, it is. That's why I went with pizza. I'm saying, all right, tomorrow's the 4th of July. Make as many pizzas as you can possibly make. Production on max. I will buy every pizza, but when regular people come in, I will step back and let them get first dibs so you're not pissing off your regular customers. This is what Bitcoin miners are doing for energy companies. They're saying, hey, we'll buy all of the excess production, but we'll step back when the free market wants to produce or wants to purchase this energy.
Perfect analogy. I'm gonna clip that. You can clip that too. You can have it. That is the perfect analogy to send to anybody when you need it. That's
Awesome.
excellent,
Hey,
man.
one more point I want to make on this is
Of course.
typically historically new emergent industries have forced people to move to certain regions of the world to capitalize on that from a job standpoint, right? When the automobile industry was booming, everyone moved to Detroit. When tech was booming, everyone moved to Silicon Valley. But the unique thing about Bitcoin mining is it actually brings these jobs to rural areas. It doesn't concentrate the new jobs into urban centers. I talked about Blockware's Kentucky facility earlier. Well, in that area of the world, your only options for work really are like McDonald's, Walmart, or maybe you could be a school teacher. That's kind of like if you're a school teacher or the manager at Walmart, like that's the best job. But now we have Bitcoin miners, and like to be honest, these guys are relatively living like kings out there because a lot of these really remote regions where a lot of the Bitcoin mining is done, there's not much other economic opportunity, and so Bitcoin miners are unique in the fact that they're bringing opportunity to these rural communities.
Of course, it totally dematerializes geographical dependence. You no longer need to be, and technology has done that in and of itself. I mean, you and I are beaming through cyberspace on this supercomputer, talking to one another. You didn't have to fly out to meet me for this podcast. In the same way, those opportunities that are available for people who are endowed with these huge natural resources in areas where there isn't a lot of job opportunity. Now you can put a Bitcoin miner anywhere. You could put a Bitcoin miner there. You could put it anywhere, just like you said. And all of a sudden, that entire area gets lifted up along with it because now all of a sudden the ceiling isn't the manager at Walmart. The ceiling is now the owner of this Bitcoin mining facility, which is generating millions of dollars worth of revenue a year. It really is an amazing technology.
Precisely. Anywhere that has energy, which is pretty much everywhere, can now tap into that and make money.
Wonderful. Mitch, your book is great. Your book really touches on a lot. Um, I did enjoy my time reading it. There really is a great deal in here, and it's a very useful tool for people who might be new to Bitcoin. One thing I want to ask you, obviously we touched on a lot, but are there any other topics core to the book, central to the book, or things you want to leave the viewers with that we haven't yet discussed?
I would say that I don't necessarily make this point in my book, but Bitcoiners, we're not going to be liked in the future. This is sort of my thesis, right? You see a strong disdain in culture right now for wealthy people. And a lot of wealthy people, they were honest and hardworking and they did things by the book and they're good people, right? And then you have wealthy people who stepped on necks and did all this stuff, but there's not people aren't going to understand this distinction when we get like extraordinarily wealthy off Bitcoin, right? Because if we're right about this, like everybody in Bitcoin is going to be extraordinarily wealthy. People are just going to view you as like the toxic elite that you crush necks on your way to the top, right? And so just kind of mentally preparing yourself for that as a Bitcoiner, I think, is really key because like you and I, we work hard, we're honest people, but sort of the people that get left behind and they're stuck holding the fiat bag, there's going to be a lot of animosity towards Bitcoiners. They're not going to understand like, hey, we just kind of saw it coming. We didn't do anything wrong. We just happened to understand the dynamics at play. And so just definitely mentally prepare yourself for that. I see a lot of things about, oh, Bitcoin's going to unite the world. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think this sort of the flames of division are going to burn a lot brighter as fiat continues to deteriorate.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Bitcoin being an alternative for people to use to insulate themselves during that time is hugely important. Between Bitcoin being free money aligning with the idea of free markets, which conservatives are hugely behind, Bitcoin allowing for independent energy production, which is something that obviously is core to the idea of conservatism, restoring the nuclear family, and above all, being fundamentally aligned with the founding principles of America, right? And the founding principles of America are rules, not rulers, right? And Bitcoin is rules without rulers. Mitch, it's been an absolutely excellent rip, man. People are going to find a lot of value on this. I hope that their 4th of July celebration is all the more patriotic as a result of our conversation here. I think it will be. As I've plugged your book several times. Before we leave viewers here, where would you like to send them?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. This was a blast. You can find this on Amazon. Just search the conservative case for Bitcoin. I'm sure the link will be in the description. Normally the price is $17.76, very patriotic, but because I love 4th of July, I dropped the price to $9.99. So that'll end the end of 4th of July weekend. So I think Sunday the 6th or something like that. So if you're seeing this episode when it comes out, go definitely snag the book, snag a copy to give to your dad, your friends, whomever, because it's a pretty fat discount right now. So I really appreciate you having me on, bro. This was a good conversation.
Absolutely, Mitch. You heard the man. Go to Amazon, search up the conservative case for Bitcoin, or just click the link. If you're watching this on X, click the link in the follow-up tweet. If you're on YouTube, click the link in the description. Get it over the long weekend while it's still $9.99. And you can follow Mitch at Mitchell Hodl, HODL on X. Mitch, it's been excellent, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.